So now I've got coolant leaking from the water pump from the gasket, a little bit from the seal on top of the water pump, which is, as a lot of you know, quite common. But it's also, you can't see it now, but it's also starting to seep past the hose here. It doesn't look happy. I would say that that's because the coolant is acidic and it's actually eating past the gaskets and eating past the hoses and finding its way out, which is really bad. But all we can do for now is put it right and sort this cooling system out, get these hoses sorted. I'm going to do hoses on the rear, heater core hoses, top and bottom radiator hose, and I'm going to put a new radiator into it and fresh coolant. I'll actually show you what's in here before I drain it. It's coolant, it's not water, and that's part of the reason why I left it and I didn't do it before the winter. I wasn't forced to do it because it wasn't like just water. I'm going to do belts as well. She's going to have all new belts. I didn't do the belts. She's going to have a timing belt. It's quite a big one. Don't know why I left that till the last, because that's the biggest part of this job. So I don't know if I'm one of the only ones that didn't know about this. I feel like that might be the case because this seems like a really obvious thing that should be common knowledge, but usually draining coolant, taking off the bottom hose, putting a bucket underneath, but most of it doesn't go in the bucket. Most of it goes on the floor. So there, where is it? There's like a drain plug, and you can plug a hose on, loosen it off, and all the coolant will drain out of the engine. How did I not know about this? Why did nobody tell me? You've been watching me drain the coolant by pulling the bottom hose and having a coolant shower in, I think, probably at least 3 videos, if not more. And all along I could have just done that. So there it goes. Look at that. Calmly and sensibly into an empty jug without spilling one drop. Now, it would go faster than that, but I've only opened it a little bit of the way. But that's it. Sensible, civilised, no drama. It's a thing of beauty. It's honestly changed my life.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Below the bottom of this hose, where this part is, this bottom part of the water pump, there'll still be more coolant lower than that in the block. So that's where that drain plug really comes in handy. If you don't take the water pump off, then you can get that extra out by loosening that tap instead of taking off the water pump, if you actually want to get all of the coolant out of the car. But there's still going to be some in there because you've got what's lower than the water pump here on this side will be sat in the bottom of the radiator, in the bottom of this hose, so there'll still be a little bit. So now I'm going to start by just taking everything off. Usual simple stuff. "50-50" again as usual, half on the floor, half in the bucket. Oh yeah. Yeah, you don't want it crystallising and doing things like that. Perfect. We have a mark there, I'm sure you can see it, little Tipex mark, but normally it's just a cutout, it's just a little slot, and it lines up with this line here. It says 0 there, and then there's a dot here that lines up with a dot on the cam cover. Loosen off the tensioner nut. Put the tool on. Hopefully it's not mega tight. There it goes. Someone's not happy, are they? Oh dear. So this one is starting to round off, which is a bit annoying. Hopefully some mole grips can save the day here. This is really disgusting here. So much stuff. Yeah, I had to move the camera, but I managed to crack it off with the grips. Yeah, needless to say, that bolt's not going back in there. We can slide the belt off. There we go. So they actually look to be in really good shape. There's nothing really wrong with them. But they got Volvo stamped on the side, faintly. And yeah, who knows, maybe they're the original ones, probably. And you know, well, I take that back. There's a split there. So that was waiting to get me. So that could have easily been coolant loss, overheated, head gasket, who knows what else. So I've cleaned up the block face with a razor blade and some wet and dry. I've put a bit of silicone on the pump side just to stick the gasket on, and yeah, then I'm going to put a bit more silicone on this side of the gasket and then just slide it onto the block. Putting plenty of silicone grease on the rubber ring that goes here, the O-ring. So that slides in nice. Seal in here and then slide it on. So we've got our new tensioner, very nice and shiny. So they don't give you a spring, so you need to reuse the old one, but it's normally totally fine to reuse. Maybe some people would advise replacing it, especially on a car this old, but I don't know, I've never had any issues with them. They normally do just fine, so I'm going to reuse it. We'll see how we get on. We'll make sure the belt's tight enough. And then it just slides over nice and firm, and then push it all the way on. So now we can take the tension. Hit my funny bone. So now we can pull out a drill bit and put some tension on the belt. We can put the washer on and the timing belt cover and the pulley, and then we can turn the engine over and just make sure that our marks do line up. So whilst I was tinkering away down there, I looked up and I noticed that the cables didn't look so great. I've just spotted quite severe corrosion on my starter motor cables. These positives are looking very green. Hopefully you can see that. I mean, obviously the wire will be corroded inside, so it needs to be replaced, but whilst I'll have to get one on order, but until it arrives. Just basically spray my whole engine bay with contact cleaner. Pack a load of grease around it. So that the plug's in. Just check our marks. Yeah, bang on. Now we can actually lock down our pulley again, torque up the nut, finish all that off. So I know I keep going off topic, but I keep noticing things that I think you guys could find quite helpful. So I just noticed that here there's actually quite a bit of oil leaking out of there. That is quite bad, isn't it? And I didn't notice that. It's not dripping on the ground, but so I just tried to tighten them up, the nuts, as you can see, and that one was really quite loose. But this happens a lot. I've seen this a lot, guys, over the years. There being an oil leak from the valve cover gasket, well, from the valve cover, and you assume it's the gasket, but actually the nuts aren't tight enough. 60 Newton meters, then 60 degrees. From Scandix I got it from, and yeah, not any kind of sponsor or anything like that, but yeah, they do. It is a nice tool. It is good. You can probably use it as like self-defense as well, home defense if you needed to. There's probably other things you could do with it, because it is a solid bit of kit. I don't know if there's a torque setting, but if there is, I don't know what it is. Just do it FT. So before I get too carried away, I will just turn it over. I'll just start it quickly, make sure that the belt's not doing anything funny before I put too much stuff back on. I'm happy with it. There's a little bit of movement on the belt. I've seen it before. It's a bit of a pain, but yeah, I think it will be fine. So we've got a new thermostat as well, a 92 degree, because it's actually better when this car runs that bit hotter, because it helps with the piston slap. Never really goes away, but once it gets up to sort of 92, that was what the last stat was, gets up to its highest point, it does quieten down quite a lot. So jiggle pin at 12 o'clock. Always usually forget this. I'm finally getting used to it. New radiator. Normally you've got this part here that threads in the fan switch, which isn't in use on this car. They just send you something without a thread, a hole, and then yeah, a seal and a blanking plug. And I was like, surely I'm not just supposed to push that in there, like what's actually to keep it in there? If it can push in, surely it can push out. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I asked the mate, he's not available at the moment, didn't get an answer, so I thought, well, I'll just try it. And that's part of the reason why I didn't have the camera on. So I literally just put the seal in and then just put a little bit of silicone grease just to help this in, and popped it in. So I'm actually doing a flush on this one, distilled water. We'll take it for a couple of drives. Gonna drive it a little bit, let it flush, drain it out. I haven't got water here, no hose pipe, nothing like that, so, well, that's some kind of flush. I've got the hose on the middle of the radiator. That was a bit silly. So everything I just poured went straight onto the ground, so that was about a litre. My tap in the block was open as well, just lost even more. Well, I suppose at least that kind of flushed out the block a little bit as well. So yeah, we'll switch the heater to hot and we'll let her run. So this happens quite a lot. I can't usually bleed cars up. Sometimes I can, sometimes not. First time in the garage when they're facing this way. There's actually quite a big slope. I don't know if it will show it so much on camera, but it's a ramp all the way up. So when they're facing like nose down, the cooling system, you get an airlock and then it can't circulate and it's just not going to play ball. You just got to make sure that the nose is higher. Well, it's mostly about this bottle being the highest point, not the radiator core or something like that.